Welcome to Cleantech Forward, a Foresight podcast where we explore clean tech customers, capital, and Canada's path to net zero. Tune in to learn more about Canada's most exciting clean tech startups, industry success stories, investor insights, and academic initiatives as we accelerate the growth and impact of clean tech together.
This Cleantech Forward podcast is supported by Gowling WLG. A global leader in intellectual property law, Gowling WLG works alongside Canadian cleantech companies to develop IP strategies that maximize business opportunities and increase market share while protecting valuable innovation. From idea to investment to international expansion, Gowling WLG understands the potential of your intellectual property at every stage of growth. Visit gowlingwlg.com/cleantech to learn how they can support your business today. Welcome to Cleantech Forward. I'm Jeanette Jackson, CEO of Foresight Canada. Today on the show, we're wrapping up our three-part series on the exporting of Canadian clean tech with a discussion around some of the tools made available by the Government of Canada for Canadian entrepreneurs. So far in the series, we've chatted with a few ventures who have already ventured into global markets, FredSense and CarbonCure, about the process of finding those overseas customers, and our friends at the Netherlands-based Water Alliance and Denmark's Clean Cluster about how they support innovators looking to export their technologies. If you haven't listened to those episodes, make sure you go back and check those interviews out today. Canada has been recognized as a hotbed for clean tech innovation. From groundbreaking advancements in renewable energy and carbon capture, storage, and utilization, to revolutionary solutions for waste management and water conservation, Canadian clean tech companies are at the forefront of the global transition to a cleaner, net zero future. We have an abundance of talented, passionate clean tech innovators who are poised to deploy their technologies and make incredible impacts on global sustainability challenges. But our domestic market for the adoption of many of these technologies is relatively small. In order for many Canadian companies to remain competitive, achieve scale, and gain a foothold in their target markets, finding customers outside of Canada is necessary. And while international markets are a good solution for the issue of adoption, expanding globally comes with its own set of unique barriers. Foreign regulations, cultural differences, infrastructure, and logistics challenges can be overwhelming, but there are options for Canadian exporters. Joining us today are representatives from two of Canada's export supporting organizations, the Trade Commissioner Service and Export Development Canada. The Trade Commissioner Service, operating under the banner of Global Affairs Canada, acts as a strategic partner to Canadian businesses by providing them with tailored support and guidance throughout their international expansions. Through its vast network of trade commissioners in over 160 cities worldwide, the TCS offers invaluable market intelligence, trade insights, and connections to key decision makers and industry influencers. Export Development Canada, on the other hand, serves as Canada's export credit agency, helping Canadian businesses overcome financial barriers when entering foreign markets. With a comprehensive suite of financing and risk management solutions, EDC empowers clean tech companies to secure the necessary funding, manage international trade risks, and access working capital to successfully compete on a global scale. Joining us first is Allan Edwards, the Senior Trade Commissioner and Head of Office at the High Commissioner of Canada's Trade Office in Johannesburg, South Africa. Allan is joining the podcast to discuss the options available to Canadian cleantech exporters and what Canadian organizations like EDC and the TCS do to support. Here is some of my interview with Allan about how he ended up at the TCS and what they've been doing to support Canadian exporters.
I've been at this for about 30 years. I was recounting this story that before I joined the Foreign Service, I basically had a fairly political career, in as much as I worked for a member of Parliament, and that was where I thought things were going to take me. And when they interviewed me for the job in 1993, they were interviewing for people to be in the political side, the trade side, or the immigration side. And I just thought it was a natural fit that I would be in the political side, not the trade side. When they asked me at the very end if they offered me a position in any one of the three, would I take it? And I said, well, it relayed what I just said. I probably more political, but if you guys see something in me that's more trade related, then I will trust you, and I would absolutely take the job. But don't put me in immigration, because I don't have the heart to say no to anybody. So So I didn't say that I would do that one. And they came to me with trade. Now, I should note that in between working for the Member of Parliament and joining the Foreign Service and the Trade Commissioner Service, I actually had worked, I had my own business. So I guess there's something in me that's just entrepreneurial, and I admire people who are entrepreneurial. I admire smart people who come up with great technologies. And quite frankly, I've had the opportunity to help many of them in foreign markets, mostly in East Asia. But now I'm working in South Africa. So very happy to be a trade commissioner. I've often said that if I didn't have this particular job as a trade commissioner, I don't think I would work in the government. So I hope that kind of describes the kind of person I am.
So we do a lot of work with the Trade Commissioner Services here at Foresight. And for those of you listening, the Trade Commissioner Service is a government organization that operates within Global Affairs Canada, which is Canada's Foreign Affairs Department. And the Trade Commissioner serves as a key resource for Canadian businesses seeking to expand internationally and navigate global markets. Allan, can you give us a summary of what the Trade Commissioner Service is and does?
Well, the Trade Commissioner Service is made up of over 1,000, the professionals who are scattered in 161 cities all over the world. And what we're here to do, to put it in a nutshell, is to help you find the relationships you need in export markets. And so I'm currently in South Africa. When I was in Japan, when I was in Taiwan, it was, we would work with the local partners there to find opportunities for Canadian technologies. So what we're trying to do is help Canadian companies or facilitate Canadian companies to enter into new markets internationally. We're trying to diversify our trade. Don't get me wrong, we have a very fantastic trade commissioner network in the United States, but we're also trying to diversify it into other parts of the world. So what we're trying to do, and when a Canadian company is feeling like they're export ready, the first step of the process is to connect with our regional offices. We have regional offices all over Canada, and connecting with them, they can actually help to work with you, with a Canadian company, to say, look, here's some weaknesses you've got, here's the strengths you need to play on, and let's work together to make sure that we get you to where you need to go so that you're export ready. Once you're export ready, then we can help you to decide which are the markets that are going to be more. Oftentimes we don't need to tell them. The Canadian companies know better than we do, but oftentimes it's a good discussion to have, to sit down and say, well, that market might not be the kind of market that you're going to have an easy time with. This is another one that poses opportunities that you should really be looking at, and then we can get you to that market and help you find the right partners to help you understand the regulations that you're going to need to be aware of, to ease your way into that market and find opportunities for you. And finally, the things that we do surround troubleshooting. So a Canadian company can go to a market and things are going really well, and then all of a sudden somebody's not responding to their messages, or not paying their bills, or something's happened and you're not getting answers. Depending on the market, and I know that this was true in Japan. It was seen as something that you did not want to have a foreign embassy call up and say, hey, what's going on with that bill? And it would usually be resolved very quickly. So there's things like that we can do. And we can also represent and introduce the Canadian company to a government entity, for example, and argue on their behalf and do trade diplomacy. So we do that. We also, again, on the other side of the same trade diplomacy, there's trade agreements. Those are the things that we negotiate. And we consult with Canadian industry before we enter into these types of agreements and make sure that what we're getting is something that's going to be beneficial to Canadian business. So the bottom line for us is the task I'm doing today going to help make Canadian industry and the Canadian economy stronger? Is it going to create jobs? Is it going to support Canadian technology? That's what goes through our minds every day.
Well, it's so aligned with what we think about at Foresight as well. I mean, the reality is, for Canadian companies to scale, we really need to drive both domestic and international adoption of those solutions. And then, of course, we want to attract some of the best clean tech companies to Canada, as well as foreign direct investment, to make sure that we're decarbonizing industry here with the best solutions that are as far along as possible, not having to start from the innovation stage. If things are commercial and ready, let's get that technology deployed. When you think about clean tech and sustainability technologies, are you seeing some trends and movements in the areas that you support in terms of demand for Canadian clean tech solutions?
Absolutely. I'll give you a quick story. Our High Commissioner and the High Commission here in South Africa is engaging in installing solar capacity. You may or may not know that in South Africa, there's some real energy issues that they've got. And so you've got a lot of load shedding, which is a polite way to say blackouts, rolling blackouts. And so, we're currently, the embassy and the trade office has to run generators on diesel generators, which is not decarbonizing anything. And so we've decided we need to put in solar capacity into this. And really where it was driven, what really surprised the High Commissioner was listening to other ambassadors from around the world who were here in South Africa who were saying, yeah, we're bringing in Canadian solar. You guys have the best technology in the world. So there is a recognition that Canadian technology in the clean tech sector is high. There's a real desire to be able to partner with Canadian clean tech companies in areas such as green hydrogen, solar. So we're seeing that around the world, people are recognizing that Canada is a leader in this area. It's just a question of finding a way to connect the Canadian technologies with the people who are local. What you'll find is a lot of times in countries internationally, they're trying to develop their own stuff. And so you sometimes find yourself at odds. You'll bring a Canadian technology there and they'll go, well, we're trying to develop that. And they see it as a competitor rather than as a potential partner. So a lot of what we're trying to do in the Trade Commissioner Service is make sure that we're presenting Canada as a partner of choice, and that Canada can be someone who can help you get to where you need to go. And let's face it, if we can get enough countries to get to where they need to go on decarbonization, I should say, well, that's helping the world get to where it needs to go. So yeah, those are the kinds of things that I'm seeing.
That's wonderful. It sounds like you're identifying clear export opportunities and market trends in the global clean tech sector. How do you relay that information to Canadian clean tech companies? Do you have a database or some other mechanism?
Well, we do have an online magazine that we send out to people, and that collects all sorts of, when we identify something, we feed it into that. But really, the biggest thing I would say, and the most important way that we are able to convey these opportunities to Canadian companies is basically relationships that we've created. So as I mentioned, when you asked what we did at first, I mentioned our regional office network. I can't stress strongly enough, particularly for startups and for companies that are just getting ready to export, get to know your regional office. Get to know that we have them all over the country. And we're constantly in contact with them, telling them that we've got this trade event, we've got this conference, we've got this opportunity that exists with a large utility. We've got any number of new potential clients that we can present, and they're aware of it. The clean tech officers in those regional offices are aware of what we're doing. So the other thing I would say is it's important to just be on their radar so they know who you are and they can present you to us. Because as I say, we've got these offices overseas. Our job is we're kind of like, I suppose you could say, where the rubber hits the road. We're the ones that are really making those introductions and creating those relationships between Canadian companies and entrepreneurs with local people, either distributors or manufacturers or whoever, users. We're the ones who are doing that, but we work seamlessly with our regional offices who are able to take Canadian technologies and bring them to us and say, look, this is a new thing. You got anything over there? And then we start to talk like that. So it's a team effort that exists within the Trade Commissioner Service. We are constantly in contact with the regional offices. So I would say it's important for Canadian companies, if you're new to exporting, or if you haven't done it yet, go talk to the regional office. They can help you. They can really, make you ready to export the right way the first time, rather than make the mistakes that when you're doing something new, you kind of do.
Does the Trade Commissioner Service help cleantech innovators access funding or investment opportunities from international sources as well?
Absolutely. When you look at the Trade Commissioner Service, we have officers, particularly at our larger posts. They're very specific in terms of what it is they look after. So they become experts in mining, or they become experts in clean tech or agriculture or what have you. We also have investment experts, and I know that for myself, for example, when I was posted to Seattle, I was the investment development officer, and I spent most of my time working with venture capitalists and angel networks. So I was able to get an understanding of who it was who was making the investments and what they were investing in. So I could explain that very well, and I could direct Canadian startups and people who were looking to get that kind of investment to the right person at the right time with the right cultural knowledge on how to approach these people. This is one of the other things that is, I think, powerful for the Trade Commissioner Service. We're in country, and we have a lot of locally engaged staff who help us greatly. And I mean, honestly, they're the meat in the sandwich. And I got to tell you, you go to any different country, and say you've sold into Japan, and you think that you can go to Taiwan and do it the same way. It doesn't work the same way. And so you need that kind of cultural guidance on how you approach the people that you're going to be dealing with. And that's the kind of knowledge that we can provide.
I mean, we hear from ventures that capital is one of their biggest barriers to scale. And I can imagine once they get into those ecosystems that opportunities open up. And it's really the Trade Commissioner Service having feet on the ground and knowing those networks and how those ecosystems operate, that those opportunities become available, which I think is a decent segue into, some of the challenges of breaking into foreign markets when it comes to new regulations and laws that the ventures need to navigate. Can you offer support for clean tech innovators to help them understand international regulations and standards related to their products and services?
Absolutely. This is one of the things that we do. And so every country is different. And I'll give you the example of if you're going to go into medical devices or pharmaceuticals into Japan, they have completely different standards based on their Japanese, and we're not. And it doesn't make a lot of sense, and it takes an awful lot of time and knowledge to understand what that is. And so this is what we do, particularly our locally engaged who are here. They don't rotate out like the Canadian-based staff do. And so they've got a very solid understanding, not only of the regulations, but who does the regulating. And that is one of the real strengths of having boots on the ground who can actually really help you out. And sometimes it's beyond what we can do. We can give you the idea of what it is you're facing and direct you to somebody who can help you with that. And that's oftentimes very useful, so that we put you in touch with a reputable lawyer, a reputable, specialist who can actually help out with the with a very, it's a maze in the jungle sometimes in terms of what these regulations are. And I know that clean tech is particularly highly regulated area. It also it goes hand in hand, like being able to assist Canadian companies with the regulations and what needs to be done, and giving them a heads up ahead of time so that they hit the ground ready to run. It's also about identifying the opportunities that exist and letting Canadian companies make a decision for themselves. Is it worth it? There's a cost benefit analysis. We've got regulations that are going to make it difficult for us, but there's this opportunity over here, which, we really can't walk away from. And so this is what we do, and this is what we try to do every day, is make sure that we're on top of these regulations. We're on top of what the new the new rules are and how that's going to affect Canadian companies and how it's going to affect their decisions to come to the new markets. Because as I say, our entire raison d'être is to help Canadian companies find new markets and find new customers and grow. And that's what we're here to do. So regulations is something is extremely important to us.
How does the Trade Commissioner Service collaborate with other government agencies or organizations to enhance supports for clean tech innovators?
It's an excellent question. We're constantly in contact with ISED, with NRC, with IRAP, for example, we just had the annual bilateral consultations with South Africa, and throughout the whole process, we were coordinating with NRCan, we were coordinating with a number of other government departments to ensure that the negotiations went smoothly, and that we're helping to facilitate any of the agreements or MOUs or anything that has actually been signed between them. So we work with any different government organization. In particular, we also work with the provinces. The provinces are really key partners for us. And so it differs from country to country. For example, when I was in Japan, I dealt a lot more with British Columbia than I did with Nova Scotia. Whereas when I was working on the Eastern European desk, I dealt a lot more with Newfoundland and Nova Scotia than I did with British Columbia. But they're key partners for us. And I suppose in a way, sort of the closer you get to the ground, the more you understand who the players are. So we always make sure that we work with governments at all levels, and we coordinate based on what the need is. So, for example, we've been working with PCH, the Canadian Heritage, on a co-production agreement, and this goes from everything from just facilitating the discussions to taking notes at the meetings that we have and trying to make sure that we're coming to this MOU that makes sense for both Canada and South Africa.
What are some of the main challenges that clean tech innovators face when expanding internationally?
That's an excellent question, because there's an awful. I've touched on some of them already. If you're expanding internationally, depending on how well you know the market into which you're trying to enter, you can really trip yourself up with the cultural landscape. And that's something that the Trade Commissioner Service works hard to help with. Clean tech is highly regulated. For example, here we have some real issues with some of the political leaders and their views on how to decarbonize. Having a clear understanding of what that is can truly help you create a strategy that's going to work when you're entering into this market in particular. But that's not different from other markets as well. Being aware of the opportunities is another thing, because you don't know what you don't know. And let's face it, South Africa is not top of mind for many Canadian companies. In fact, many Canadian companies have the United States so top of mind, and that's good enough for them. So, and I'm not knocking that, go for it. But if you're coming to a new market, it's really important to understand the cultural landscape. It's important to understand the political landscape. It's important to understand the regulatory landscape. And these things trip up a lot of clean tech companies. I think the other thing is you just don't know who you're dealing with sometimes. And if you don't have somebody who can vet, and that's something that we can do for Canadian companies. You've gotten somebody who sent you a note that says, I'm the biggest solar installer in Southern Africa. You don't know that, and so it's not a bad thing to just pick up the phone and say, hey, can you guys vet who are these guys? And you might find you're talking about a fly by night kind of organization. So those are things that can trip up clean tech companies. Inevitably, there's funding. We already mentioned this. Access to funding. And it's just being new in a market is sometimes a real challenge, particularly for startups. If nobody knows your name and nobody knows who you are, it's difficult to open some doors. having a trade commissioner who knows these people, who's been knocking on their doors many times and knows Sasol and knows all these major companies, can open those doors for you. So I see the challenges that happen that face clean tech companies, and I can honestly say the TCS is gearing itself up to try to address those for those clean tech companies.
At what stage should they reach out to you? Is it better to wait until they're at a certain level in their commercialization or scale up strategy, or is it better to get to know them sooner?
Oh, I get to know your RO right away. If you don't have a product, okay, that's fine. You should concentrate on that. But once you've got something, at the very least, and depending on what you're looking for, again, many Canadian companies get to a prototype level and they need some investment. Well, reach out to the RO and talk with them about what it is you need and what it is you're looking for, and they can help you with that. And they will inject you into the Trade Commissioner service on the posts that are international when it's the right time to put you in, depending on what it is you're looking for. If you've got a product and you're manufacturing that product, then obviously just get to know I would say first step, get to know your regional office, and they can guide you in terms of when it's the right time to inject you into the Trade Commissioner service.
Like, at its core, why is it so important that the Government of Canada offer Trade Commissioner service supports to clean tech entrepreneurs?
Well, I think, to be quite honest, the Canadian market isn't quite as big as we like to think it is. And so to be able to open up new markets for Canadian companies just is something that makes sense to strengthen the industry as a whole and to foster and support the technology that's being created. I have to admit, I've seen too many examples of Canadians who have the best idea on earth, but they can't find anybody to buy it, and then it just withers on the vine. So it makes a lot of sense for the Canadian government to be supporting clean tech startups. It makes a lot of sense for us to be supporting that technology and putting it in front of people in international markets who can put it to good use. And quite frankly, maybe haven't thought about it, or maybe it's an input, or maybe it's something that they can partner up and merge those technologies into something that they've developed. The relationship that we create, because it's not the TCS that creates the relationship, we create the opportunity and the introduction. It's up to Canadian startups and it's up to Canadian business. And I trust Canadian startups and Canadian businesses to make the right decisions for their companies. So if they come in and the relationship looks better, that they find a contract manufacturer, or they find a distributor, or they enter into a direct relationship, export of their technologies, or they have to make an investment into the country that will allow them to have an office that, liaises with. It doesn't matter what the relationship is. I leave that to the Canadian companies to decide what makes sense for them. But for us, it's about finding them the partner that they can talk to that's going to have the highest likelihood of creating an opportunity. And once that opportunity is created and that Canadian company has decided what's best for them, that means jobs for Canadians. That means technology that stays Canadian, technology that as I mentioned earlier, we are recognized as a world leader. It would be great to stay that way. And so you don't do that by resting on your laurels. You do that by going out and getting your elbows up.
I love it. I love it. Couldn't agree more. Allan, what is the last thing that you would leave the audience with today, whether it's someone in a venture, a partner, a funder, a government organization? What advice would you give for people that are looking to scale their solutions into international markets?
That's a big question, but I'll tell you what I will say is this: Canadian companies, and we have data to show this, when Canadian companies use the Trade Commissioner service in their international trading activities, they tend to not just tend, it's by a large margin, they export to more countries, they export faster, they export more. So by all means, use us. We're here. I know we're not free because you got to pay taxes, but there you go. After that, we're here for you. Use us. Again, first step, go to the regional office, talk to them, download, put it on your favorite section, get that, find a trade commissioner. Because it's not just the regional offices you can find a trade commissioner. You can find a trade commissioner anywhere in the world. And as I say, it takes a fraction of a second. So don't deny yourself something so easy that could really help your business internationally.
Allan and the TCS are doing amazing work to support our innovators, and it seems to be working. According to Stats Canada, our innovators exported $17.9 billion of environmental or clean tech products in 2021. That figure accounts for 2.3% of Canada's total exports. That's an increase of $3.2 billion from 2020. The vast majority of that was exported to the United States at a total of $13.6 billion, or just over 75% of Canada's total exports of environmental and clean tech products. There's a tremendous opportunity for clean tech exports to find new markets for their products, especially in countries like China, South Africa, or India that still have a heavy reliance on coal-based energy production. Roughly 1/5, or $2.5 billion of that $17.9 billion figure, was clean energy exports. With more than 160 offices around the world, TCS has experts that can help you find a home for your technology. However, exporting your technology can come with additional financial risks, making it difficult for innovators to bridge the gap between domestic and international markets, which is where an organization like EDC can help ease the transition. Our next guest is Lynn Cote, the National Lead of Cleantech Ecosystems and Market Intelligence with the Cleantech team at Export Development Canada. Lynn has been with EDC since 1990 and has been focused on supporting cleantech exporters since 2013. I'll let her give you the full story and more on how EDC helps protect Canadian entrepreneurs who are doing business internationally.
Just post my undergrad, I worked for Hudson's Bay Company after having worked my way through, in Quebec, we call it Cégep and university, working at Zellers. So I was an assistant to the toy buyer, which was a lot of fun. And then I worked at the computing center in Toronto. And I applied to a job at EDC through the old-fashioned way that seems unfathomable now, through an ad in the Globe and Mail.
Now, EDC does a lot for Canadian businesses, and actually for a lot of businesses that are trying to access Canadian products and services. Can you give us a summary of what Export Development Canada is and does?
Sure. And yeah, you're right. Sometimes people get a bit confused, like, what are you? I always summarize it as that, we're a trade credit insurer and a bank. So we're an insurance company and a bank. And on the insurance side, we have export credit insurance, which is an insurance on receivables. So if a Canadian company sells their goods or services outside of Canada, we insure the receivable for 90% of its value. So very valuable, provides protection, and also provides then an asset that banks will use as part of their borrowing margin. We also have other insurance, which we colloquially call bonding. And in cleantech in particular, that often takes the form of performance guarantees. So people may like a product and say, hey, I love it. I love the new technology. I love what it does. But, I'm not, allowed to take that kind of risk. So what happens if it doesn't work, or you don't, do it on time? So our bonding program is basically a guarantee, typically of a letter of credit that's issued by a bank to provide, a security piece to the buyer. So a tool that's very much used by clean tech companies. And then on the other side, the banking side, we do, every kind of loan, including loan guarantees, which we partner with all the financial institutions in Canada. We do direct loans. We participate in club or syndicated group loans. We do specialized project finance loans. And then as part of that sort of greater financing, we also have an equity team that invests directly into companies, into clean tech funds and other funds as well. And also we have a very popular matching program, which we started during COVID and have kept on, where we match funds for clean tech companies and others, but we're focused on clean tech here. So we would match the investment of a lead investor. So very popular and a great way to get more capital out to companies. So in a nutshell, that's what EDC does. We also have a number of what we call knowledge products. So we have a fantastic website, lots of country information. We also have a team where folks can ask questions about, how do I sell to, any given country. They do fantastic research on very specific asks. And we also have, and as part of our team, we do connections to, so connecting clean tech companies with potential adopters. So we have 3 people on our team who do that specifically for clean tech. Again, very valuable and a way for Canadian companies to engage with potential adopters that they would normally, it would be difficult for them to engage with. So insurance products, lending products, investments, and knowledge.
I mean, we know some of this stuff, but even every time you mention some new pillars of activity, I think, oh, how is that, and how that can be applied to clean tech companies, which I think is a good segue. How does EDC support clean tech innovators in their international business endeavors, and what are some of the specific services that are available to Canadian clean tech exporters?
So the first one is the bonding. So the ability to make a sale where there is a guarantee on performance, I think, is really important in certain industries, in certain markets. The bonding is required. It's not a nice to have. It just has to be there. So, for example, in certain municipalities in the U.S., projects have to be bonded because they're by law can't take any kind of mostly technical risk or any risk at all. And I would say the second most popular is the loan guarantee, especially for companies who are just starting out their export journey, commercialization. What it does is it provides a percentage guarantee to financial institution that's providing a loan to a company. And often we'll see that accompanied by a credit insurance on the receivables, but it very much depends on the type of business model that the company has. And I think the third is really the equity, the matching program. Again, while the revenue threshold is $1 million, because our expertise is not in early stage investments, it's still proven to be wildly popular and continues to be, and very impactful for companies who are looking for that sort of takeoff growth capital.
I understand that one of the roles of EDC is to help entrepreneurs navigate the risk associated with operating in international markets. What are some of those risks, and what can EDC do to help?
Yeah, with respect to the risk of operating in international markets, I mean, a lot of that is around the products that are financial solutions and our knowledge solutions. So knowledge solutions could be, for example, specific regulations in the water sector in Italy, for example. So that could support a company who's perhaps looking at potential opportunities in Italy and not sure whether they quite understand what the regulations are. So that's part on the knowledge side. I think on the financial solutions side, the credit insurance is a direct protection to make sure that if the buyer doesn't pay, that the Canadian company is not out of pocket. On the financial side, whether it's equity or a loan, I mean, that can support the plan, right? If a company, for example, wants to grow by acquisition in a different market, or needs to add another line in their facility to make more of whatever it is they make because they're doing well, those are things that we would provide loans for. So the risk piece starts to be, our economics team does a brilliant job of identifying risks. And a little plug for our country assessment page on edc.ca. If people are interested in specific countries and understanding what may be the risks, I highly recommend going there. So through some of the risk mitigation, whether it's credit insurance or in some cases the bonding, we are able to help sort of identify those risks to the companies and provide the solutions for them. We don't cover all the risks, but I think when it comes to the trade part, we've got a lot to offer. And then I would say also that we have just the experience of seeing repeated business go to certain markets, and we learn and understand what some of those risks may be, especially in markets where emerging, developing markets, sometimes it can be a bit of a challenge. So we can share that information with exporters and hopefully, help them target the markets a little bit better and try to go, especially if they're in growth mode or early commercialization, go where the lowest hanging fruit, right? And then as they grow, then they can go into places that may be a little bit more risky.
In all of your activities, does EDC collaborate with other stakeholders, such as government agencies, other financial institutions, and international organizations to enhance support for Canadian clean tech?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big part of my role. So we work with industry. We work closely with, and there's a lot of us now in the federal ecosystem. So BDC, SCTC, Canada Infrastructure Bank, and now the new Canada Growth Fund, NRCan, ISED, specifically the SIF fund, but writ large. So yes, we do. We work with banks on a solution perspective when we're doing the loan guarantees or the guarantees on the letters of credit for bonding. We work with a lot of the financial institutions as part of a syndicate, a group of lenders. So we work with other investors, co-investing or just sort of partnering up with them and seeing kind of what's coming down the pipe. So clean tech, it's so cliche, but it really is a team sport because it's in some ways still very nascent. The companies are still, there's a lot of them that are still very early stage. They are different than some of the other higher tech companies because there's a physicality to them, which means there's a capital intensity that doesn't exist if you're doing, just pure software plays or things in the cloud. The technical part of it is important to understand, and we do, always with consent, a lot of sharing amongst ourselves. And the other, element I think that's really important is learning from each other and trying to ensure that we can be complementary. Because on some projects, especially I would say some larger projects, there's a lot of money required at different phases. And we try to ensure that, we're all, playing our role with complementary type capital. So, and that's becoming, I would say, increasingly important as we start to see the rapid sort of development of, for example, the critical minerals sector. And each one of those projects is huge. I would say the same thing for hydrogen. We're seeing very, very large projects, and they will require collaboration of working together, sharing information, sharing knowledge, but also providing capital in what I expect will be very complex capital stacks.
Absolutely. And we're seeing so many dynamic business models that are requiring a complete evolution of how I think we can finance clean tech companies now that they're maturing. We've discussed a lot about how EDC supports clean tech entrepreneurs, but in your opinion, why is that so important to offer these types of supports?
Well, it's such a great question, I was going to say, for those of us in the East who were living in what seemed like an apocalyptic time with the fires and the smoke last week, I think it behooves all of us to support those people, those companies who are coming up with solutions to stop, mitigate, fix. So I think it's really important. EDC and our role as an export credit agency supporting exporters. We realized, when we started doing clean tech as a strategic element in 2012, that our mandate really could help companies in this nascent industry that was clearly going to become critical, and it needed to grow quickly to avoid the worst parts of climate change that we're seeing right now. So the decision back then, and the decision continues to be that, our role and now the experience that we built, standing on the shoulders of a whole bunch of people, including yourselves at Foresight, can bring that knowledge of how do you do it, so because we know it's important. These technologies, there's no point if there's a whole bunch of money that goes into them. And then when they come to commercialize and finally have something to sell, if we don't support them, because we need these companies to be successful, because we need what they're bringing, because we're dealing with a major deadline. So that's why the collaboration piece becomes important, so that the funders and investors can get together and do that support. But I'm really proud to say that EDC was there early back in 2012 when it was not as topical as it is today.
I know it's different when you come from the lens of living and breathing clean tech and climate, all the time, and balancing that with the realities of what we're facing. When should a prospective clean tech exporter approach EDC for support, and what do you look for in those companies that approach you?
That's a great question. So one thing that I would say is that, while our sort of prime directive is to support exporters, we know that a lot of the companies will have to, build it in Canada first. It's really hard to go outside of Canada, and people will say, well, how many of these have you done? And zero is never a great answer. So we have the ability to, through a special part of our mandate, to also support projects and sales in Canada. And it's a pretty a broad mandate that we have. So I would say any company who is, about to or selling a product or service that needs, either market information, financial solutions, a loan, they've been requested to post a bond. They want to make sure that they get paid when they sell abroad or even in Canada. I think that's the right time to call us. And we can, sometimes we'll have a discussion. We may not be the right folks at that time, but we're always happy to do referrals to, whether sometimes SCTC, Clean Growth Hub, BDC, or others, if they may have the sort of solution that's required at the time. So, what we look for is somewhat dependent on the company, what they're doing, what their business model is, but there's certain things that continue to be true. We look for companies that their technology readiness level is, beyond a 6, usually 7, 8, closer to 9. If they've been through some type of funding that's provided at SCTC, that's always great, because, SCTC's mandate is to fund companies' projects that have environmental benefit. So we look at that. We look at, any other funding they've received. We look at what is their solution, what's the addressable market, what problem are they fixing, obviously and how much does it cost to fix it. So we're looking at sort of the economics, and who would be their market, who would be buying it. Are they impacted by incentives or regulations? Are the regulations going the right way for them? And then ultimately, I think, when we've done an analysis of where, we've had some losses, there's one thing that comes up, each time, is the quality of the team, and, how well the team is surrounded. Do they have access to advice, money when things start to be difficult? And we certainly saw this with COVID, and frankly, with the fallout now with interest rates that are high and inflation. And so how are companies getting themselves through these challenges, right? And that very much comes down to the team, the experience, and having access to, it's not only money, it's just some really good people around them that can help them and guide through some difficult channels. Because every time we've had a loss, we go back to the team, and maybe some that they didn't have the opportunity to have that kind of advice experience around them.
Absolutely. And a role that definitely Foresight likes to play when we can. So last question to close off. Can you offer any advice for clean tech exporters who are looking to break into international markets?
Yeah, I think the first thing is, it's kind of like, how do you get to Carnegie Hall, right? Practice, practice, practice. I think it's research, research, research. Depending on where you're at and what kind of capital you have, is always to prudently manage your cash burn. So, don't go to, every event that maybe you're invited to. Is, think it through, think about, how much time, because it's not only money, how much time and money. Go where it's easier first. And in many cases, I know it's boring, but that could be the US. Go to markets where the motivation model to adopt your technology or your service is high. So maybe there's incentives, maybe there's regulation. And I would say use the global folks at Global Affairs, the Trade Commissioner Service. They're fantastic. But I would say focus and target and sort of plan out, okay, well, how much is it going to cost for the business development efforts? How big is the market there? And very much a focus, but I would say a measured approach. And because one of the worst things, and I've seen it quite a bit, is that companies feel that every time, it could be EDC or Global Affairs or anybody says, oh, there's this, this program, this mission, this whatever, consider it. And they feel like, oh, I can't say no because I don't want to say no to a potential lender and investor. And I think they feel quite torn. And one thing that happened during COVID is that, of course, we weren't traveling. And some of the entrepreneurs that I spoke to said, although it had very, very nasty effects, but the one thing that it provided, because, you got to look for the silver lining, is that they were not traveling as much and they were more focused, hence more focused on the business and able to think through some things as opposed to kind of reacting because, if you're in a certain industry, if certain sort of dynamics about the company, all of a sudden you're the darling and everybody wants you everywhere. But I've seen very close up where that has actually been a detriment and companies have ultimately not finished up well. So focus, 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 and go where the going is good and where the motivation model is, the best, and then build up and then look at, where you're going to go after that.
We are so fortunate in Canada to have institutions like these that are there to help our innovators branch out to new markets, find new customers, and form connections that can make doing business in foreign markets much less intimidating. EDC is doing remarkable work to support and protect Canadian entrepreneurs as they expand globally. Let's recap. Canada has some of the best innovators in the world, and the world needs our solutions. In fact, Canada is the second most represented country after the United States in the Cleantech Group's Global Cleantech 100. 2030 is coming quickly, and we've had some grim reminders lately of how important this goal is. After an extremely dry spring, Canada has already seen an unprecedented wildfire season, with more than 5.8 million hectares of forest burned this year alone. To put that into perspective, our national average of burned area in June is typically around 375,000 hectares. This means for 2023, we are already one of the worst wildfire seasons on record, with months of hot weather still to come. With smoke blanketing cities in the Northeast United States, this reinforces that climate change is a global issue without borders, and we need to work together to bring our emissions down and keep the planet livable for future generations. It's the most pressing issue of our time, and it's going to take collaboration and commitment from all of us. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the Cleantech Forward podcast wherever you listen, and to share this podcast and others with your friends and colleagues. Join us next month as we kick off our series on the acceleration of cleantech with a few of the organizations in Canada who are working hard to support cleantech innovators as they develop and deploy solutions. I'll see you there.
To learn more about Foresight's programs, events, and more, visit us at foresightcac.com or follow us on social at ForesightCAC.